it's on your brain. A hydrogen goes through your head. Still the kid it doesn't like.
Hey there YouTube, it's Kurt here, and if you listen to that song at the beginning of this video, you'll hear the tone that I got recording at home with minimal equipment. And in my opinion, it's a very good tone. And I'm here to show you guys how to get a great tone at home on a budget. And that's not just the clean tone, that's for rock tones too. I'm going to walk you through the steps of how I achieve this in my rock music. Now keep in mind, I'm going to try to be mindful of other types of genres when I'm doing this, but there are still very basic things that people should probably understand when they're creating any type of music. Some of your effects that you're sending through your guitar or your guitar amplifier, they're going to have a pretty profound effect on how that records. And really the idea is that you want your tone to cut. You want it to be distinct from the other instruments. That doesn't mean it overpowers the other instruments. That means it just cuts. It has its own place. It sits in the mix. That's what a lot of people don't understand. And really you don't want to have too much reverb going in. You want to have a clean sound going in. And in any recording software that you have out there, it's going to have an adequate reverb to add to it later. So don't worry too much about effects going into your recording, because you can always add the effects when you're actually going through and mixing and adjusting your effects in the mix. So without further ado, let's get to it. Alright, so here we're going to start with the EQ going into the mix. Here we have my Blackstar amplifier, and you can see there's different settings for the tone functions. And obviously I have my mids all the way up. This is a high mid amplifier to begin with, but on this amplifier for the dirty channel, I'm going to turn the mids all the way up. That's just what cuts through the mix without sounding harsh when you're doing your recordings. Now this works on many amplifiers. You can play it to ear with most any other amplifiers, and you can actually add some EQ to your mix once you're done recording. And when you add it into the recording after you've done it, you can probably add some in the 8 to 1200 range. That's where a lot of the boost is needed. But in terms of going in, getting your guitar tone right, even if you're doing metal and you're doing a really compressed tone, a lot of times the mids can be lacking. And that's important to evaluate once you're going to put it in your mix. Now some of them, and really if you cut out that 8 to 1200 range, it's just not going to sound very good. It's going to contrast with the bass, and that's what's important. You can have a darker tone without having it clash with the bass guitar, and that's what a lot of people don't understand. Now the overdrive. Okay, I'm gonna go over this later, but if you have an overdrive where the gain is all the way up, it's not going to sound good. It's going to sound oversaturated, and what that means is, now on lead tones that might be a little bit okay, but if you're playing a rhythm guitar part and you have your overdrive all the way up, it's going to sound like shit. You know why? You can't hear the strings, you can't hear the chords as much because they're contrasting too much. They're getting too mixed while they're going through, in this case, the tubes, and they're not going to sound great at all because they're just going to sound too meshed, and they won't sound distinct, and they won't sound very musical. Now, with that said, I'm going to go over to the cleans and tell you what I'm doing for the cleans. Now, the clean is very basic. What I would do, if I could, in the preamps were right, I would just plug my guitar for cleans right into my interface. And as you can see there, I am not doing that because the preamps in an interface are slightly different than the preamps that you'll find in a guitar amplifier. So that can often make for a darker sound, in my opinion. So what I'm doing for the clean sounds, you can mic it up if you want. I don't mic. I use the emulated output. These amplifiers have great emulated outputs, and they sound just like the real thing. And a lot of times they save you distortion that would otherwise come from using a mic. But you can get a great sound out of a mic. You just have to make sure your mic placement is right. If your placement is too far to the right, it can distort the sound, make it sound flat. If it's too, in this case I have a metal cage, that can distort the sound if it's too close. So make sure it's just at the right distance. And if you're using a different type of microphone that wasn't meant for guitars, it can kind of change the sound a little bit and make it not sound great. That's one thing I learned when I've been doing my recordings. So, alright, back to the clean. Again, there's just one tone knob on the clean channel. I just turn it a little bit up because that provides less bass for me, and we have a lot of bass into our music. So I just adjusted that a little bit, but you can adjust that by ear. So with all of these things combined, that should provide for a very good overview of how your music will sound when when you're trying to mix it and when you're trying to get a great sound out of it for your recordings. Now with that said, I'm going to play some of my other recordings and show you how it was cut. Now if I could go back and redo these recordings, I would probably even cut a little bit more bass out of them. Not that much, don't get extreme. Guitar won't sound balanced if you don't have at least a little bit of the bass sound in there. It won't sound balanced if you cut the highs too much. It's all about using your ear. So use your ear, play around at least with the settings, and play around with them in the right context. Play around with them when you have the bass up, and try several takes with different settings. You'll see the difference, and that's what you guys need to keep in mind. And that's going to help a lot of the garage guys out there that are trying to get good recordings and don't have the money to spend on the studio, but are very do-it-yourself, go-getter type of guys, like myself. So, if you guys have any questions about that, that's going to really push it forward. Yeah, if I could do a video where I was showing you my computer screen, I would, but I don't have that software right now. But I can explain it very well in person or in writing. So, if you guys have any questions, just send them out. And this is Kurt. If you... So like, subscribe, all that stuff. Sorry, this is a lot to think about, you know. It's not easy making a YouTube video, but you're talking about some complex things here. So I appreciate the understanding, guys. Peace.
A cigarette is on your breath.